I was in my office yesterday and at home, and I had just received some really lousy news, some very painful news. A young priest, about 29 years old, only been ordained about 3 years, and had an amazing ministry in camp when he was before he was ordained, and had worked a lot with a lot of young people in the Northeast. Had a very serious accident late Friday night, and he lingered on into Saturday, and early Saturday morning, this 29-year-old newly married man died, named Father William George. And it just broke my heart. It just broke my heart. And my daughter Alexandra heard me with a broken heart, and she came in and she said, "Daddy, what's wrong?" And I told her what had happened. And she looked at me and asked the question that everybody asks. "Daddy, why didn't God save Father from the car accident?" It's a good question. I felt very much like the Grinch in the story when little Cindy Lou Who caught him stealing their Christmas tree. And the old Grinch finally, after he hemmed and hawed a little bit, thought up a lie. Well, I didn't want to lie to my daughter. So we had an amazing conversation about what is the greatest tragedy that can befall a human being. Because let's face it, folks, there are some painful things in our world, lots of painful things in our world. We have whole systems of government, whole political movements that do nothing but talk about we've got to save the poor, we've got to heal the sick, we've got to take care of poverty, we've got to change our country, we've got to change our policies, we've got to pass laws, we must do this. Fervent men and women on all sides of the political issue who are desperately looking for answers to solve problems. And I confess to you, I have been on all sides of those questions. I had a long conversation, a political conversation, with a man who was absolutely just beside himself, angry at me because of what I said about the death penalty. If you want to know what I said, you'll have to ask me later. But we're fervent human beings when it comes to taking care of the poor. We make all kinds of policies and we create entire political systems about trying to take care of the poor, and yet Jesus says the poor you always have with you. We have hard questions that we humans wrestle with in our lives. What am I going to tell my daughter when something like this tragic thing happens? We struggle. And I'm convinced, brothers and sisters, we struggle because we are good at missing the point. We are good at thinking foolishly that somehow we can fix this, when in reality, the question needs to be answered before we start talking about the problem. Do you want to be well? Do you want to be well? That's the issue that every one of us must face. Do you want to be well? And I'm convinced, ladies and gentlemen, the answer to that question is much more nuanced and much more profound and much more deep and serious than any of us are willing to talk about. We think if we pass a law, the poverty will go away. We think if we would only raise taxes, or if we would only cut taxes, if we would only do this, then jobs would go up or the poverty level would drop. We foolishly are deluded into believing we can fix this without dealing with the most important issue. Do you want to be well? And I'm not talking about physically well, because folks, here's a newsflash that everybody needs to remember about these stories about Jesus healing people. Everybody Jesus healed eventually died. Every one of them. Even poor old Lazarus had 2 funerals. Bless his heart. Just doesn't seem fair. Everybody that Jesus physically healed died. I had the chance to sit with my daughter and explain to her, honey, physical death is not the greatest tragedy that can befall a human being. Why do you think Jesus said to our paralyzed man today, when he found him later on, see, you're healed, now go and sin no more so that something worse won't befall you? Do you think Jesus meant something physically worse? Of course not, dear friends. Jesus didn't mean something physically worse. Do you think God takes pleasure in hobbling us physically? I don't know about you, but that's more like Zeus than the God of the Scriptures. And I don't worship Zeus. That's the problem with most of human beings nowadays. They have such a screwed up idea of who God is that they think God's an ogre or evil, or he's out to get them, or he's angry with them, as if they had the power to stop God from being at peace. Arrogant, self-centered, narcissistic. And I'm just talking about myself. But this lousy vision of who God is warps their entire thinking. They're deluded. They're drunk with misinformation. And because of that, they can never answer the question, do you want to be well? Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, what Jesus was talking about to this paralyzed man was the something worse, was stepping into eternity, never having finally confronted what he really needed. And what he really needed was to be reconnected, to be united with God in the mystery of living in the life of the faith. That's what you need. That's what you need. Jesus said it best when he said, I am the vine, you are the branches. If the branch is broken off the vine, what happens to it? You ever bought flowers before? Anybody ever bought flowers? They even give you this little packet of powder that you could put in the water to prolong the beauty of the flowers. Why? Because those flowers, honey, are going to die. Those flowers that hubby bought you for your birthday or for Valentine's Day. Look, why do you think we leave the flowers on the Cavouclian for 40 days? Do you know why we do that? A buddy of mine said to me yesterday, he said, Father, this is beginning to look like a bad neighborhood. When you go out there today, look at the Cavouclian. It looks horrible. Why do you think we do that? Because angels, we stay asleep to our own mortality. We need constant reminders. Cut off from life, we will die. This is a reminder to us for 40 days during the days that we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that if we allow ourselves to be disconnected from Him who is life, we will wither and die just like those flowers. And so the church, in her love for us, gives us this reading of the paralytic on this 4th Sunday of Pascha to wake us up to the powerful question, do you want to be healed? Now, Jesus didn't say, do you want to be healed on your terms? Because that's exactly what the guy thought. The guy thought, do you want to be healed? He said, you don't understand, Jesus. I don't have anybody to put me in. No. I didn't ask you what your problems were. I asked you if you wanted to be healed. I didn't ask you what the breaks were in your life, or the difficulties in your life, or the obstacles that are in your life. That's not what I'm asking. Do you want to be healed? I didn't ask you to start giving me a list of excuses. Do you want to be healed? I have folks that I run into in the neighborhood, and they say, oh, Father, you know what? I'm going to start coming to church again someday. Okay. Great. That's wonderful. That's not bad. Thank God. You've heard me tell the story before about the old man and the old priest talking all day long. And the old man finally said, you know, Father, I really need to make confession. And the priest looks at him and says, well, son, are you regular in church? And the old man sheepishly kind of looked down and said, well, Father, really, I basically only go about once or twice a year. He said, oh, good, you're regular. So we're not going to throw rocks at people whose intentions are still too weak to get them into the water to be healed. But I do get to ask you, every one of you, and myself, the poignant, powerful question Jesus Christ asks each of us this morning, do you want to be healed? Yes or no? Do you or don't you? And I'm not talking about the remedy of just rubbing a little religion on you and saying, okay, I'm done. I'm talking about, do you want to get reconnected to God and have God's life flow through you in the mysteries of the divine sacraments of our faith? In just a moment, we're going to ask you to come. Those of you who are prepared to receive the Eucharist. The divine mystery of the Eucharist is the primary way the church invites you to physically get reconnected to God every week. No wonder we encourage you to take the Eucharist as often as you can, because Jesus said in John 6, if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have life in you. And if you don't, you don't. This morning, on this fourth Sunday of Pascha, our precious, life-giving, and perfect Orthodox Christian Church invites you to answer this very hard question. Do you want to be healed? Because if you do, you will be.